This panel is entitled Keeping It Real, Real-World Experiences of Leveraging Data to Power Intelligent Care Everywhere. Our goal here is to explore perspectives on how unlocking data can activate patients and inform care across settings, from the hospital to the home to the pharmacy and in between. We seek here to gain a better understanding of key issues, such as the role of new data platforms and care models in activating and engaging patients. We want to understand what it will take to achieve intelligent care everywhere. We want to know what the next frontier for bringing intelligence to the point of care will be as we solve the rate-limiting steps of interoperability and unlocking data. And we also finally want to understand the role of partnerships in realizing successful initiatives. I have with me also a microphone, which I will use in about 20 minutes. Please, when it's time for the Q&A, don't make me have to work hard. So you get to be a part of the conversation. So we have this, and we will use that. We would have begun our presentation and our conversation, if we were luckier, with our colleague Thierry Dantoine, who is the head of geriatric medicine at the French hospital CHU Limoges, which faces the special challenges of providing care to a rural population in France. He uses Qualcomm's Life's products in the hospital and home, and he well understands the challenges of addressing transitions of care. Unfortunately, Thierry was called into service being heroic at the beginning of a international flight last night. Someone suffered a stroke episode. He had to attend to them, and the plane was turned back. And as a result, he missed the connection to be here with us for this panel. We think he may well be here tonight and will be available tomorrow. So I've introduced him to you. If you see him, I would encourage you to engage him in conversation. With that, let me turn to Jonathan Levis. Jonathan, you are the Chief Medical Officer of AMC Health, a company that specializes in remote health monitoring. You're passionate about advancing what you call the quadruple aim. Now, I thought there was only the triple aim, and now I find out there's the quadruple aim, which is improving patient experience, population health, cost of care, and, as we've heard in the last panel, provider work life. And you regularly work firsthand with patients and use technology and informatics to accelerate these efforts. Let me ask you, from your background, what are you learning about how we can effectively engage people with chronic health conditions in their care and self-management in their homes?
That this is always harder than we think it is before we begin. For all of these major healthcare transformations, when I think back 20 years ago when we started rolling out EHRs and CPUE in hospitals, we thought it was going to take a couple years to do that across the country. Obviously, we were rather naive in 98 and 99 and 2000. It took a lot longer. And we're seeing that now with trying to engage patients. One of the key learnings that we've made early is a new resource in healthcare, which is the patients themselves. And that's a new revolution that's going on in healthcare. The fact that we are engaging consumers to really own their entire health and their entire care experience. And part of what's making that possible, obviously, is a transformation in the healthcare financial system, insurance. But part of what's making it possible is the change in the technologies, all the things that we've been talking about today. It enables patients to actually connect with their care teams without having to physically be in front of their care teams. And given that people don't spend most of their time, even people with chronic conditions like heart failure and diabetes, they don't spend most of their time when they, seeing me, a primary care physician, or some of the other doctors or care teams. They spend most of their time living on their own, trying to figure out how to manage their conditions. So the fact that we can now use technologies to engage them in care to create a completely different care model, a completely different clinical solution, gives us this huge asset that optimistically I think is going to accelerate the entire process of bringing in remote patient monitoring, remote care, telehealth, and all the things. And again, it's driven by a lot of things, but one of the key enablers is that we can do this, we can connect because of the new technologies.
How worried are you? I mean, you're a doc, and we've always had this this cornerstone of Western civilization, which has been the sacrosanctness of the patient-physician relationship. And it's always been this very special dyad with all kinds of ethical conundrums and expectations and so forth. Does this really turn that on its head? And are clinicians going to be able to be comfortable with giving this much power to the patient?
You know, it depends. Again, I'm going to be an optimist. I am an optimist. I'm going to look at this optimistically. It actually empowers the care team, I think, more effectively. It empowers them differently. But I'm the son of a physician, so I learned very early that physicians can be wrong sometimes, right? Because everyone knows your dad makes mistakes, whether or not dad always admits it. So at least I didn't see that halo of physicians know everything. I walked into this saying, I'm going to mess up sometimes. Part of what this provides actually is a safety net for the provider. The speaker earlier, the chief of family medicine at UCSD, who said, there's now a device to help tell my patient when his or her blood sugar is going up or down every 6-7 minutes of the day, much better than seeing me every 6 to 9 weeks. Absolutely. So that's the piece. It creates a much more effective team between the physician and it's the care team. It's not just the physician. In fact, it's even more the care team now, now that we're talking about patients doing self-management than just the physician. But it becomes a much more effective teaming relationship and setup because patients are now better prepared to take on that self-management, which is really what chronic conditions are about. You know, the physician sets up the plan working with the team, and then we've got to help the patient go with that plan. So I think it does that more effectively, and I think physicians who are and care teams that are focused on the outcomes can be excited about that.
Good. Greg Orr, you are the Senior Director for Digital Health at Walgreens. You are responsible there for managing global product strategy, development, and execution for digital health initiatives at what is now the world's largest pharmacy. Your experience has taught you that the success of new product initiatives at companies as large as Walgreens is predicated on preserving a startup mentality while simultaneously thinking at a global corporate scale. So give us an update on what's new at Walgreens and the way that you are approaching the use of data to enhance care outcomes.
Yeah, sure thing. And the key there, I think, across the entire enterprise is the customer. Some people call it the patient. Some people call it the member. It's all us, right? It's all us that take advantage of that. And both at Walgreens itself, as I think Chris had talked about, the Walgreens Connect app. We call it Connect for much the same reason we call the conference Connect, right? Is how do you connect people? And that's a global problem. Those types of issues, although the incentives may be different between the U.S. and different markets that we play in, human nature is the same everywhere, and the need to stay connected and to improve care is also everywhere. So for us, this is a kind of a recent move to move my role, and actually the entire digital health group into more of a global role. And basically it was kind of a no-brainer in the beginning because there were initiatives going on in different markets that were very similar. Right, we offer, through that Balanced Reward Healthy Choices program, which I'll talk about in a bit, we offer a certain amount of coaching. Well, lo and behold, here in the UK market, they're looking at the same type of pieces. In the market in Mexico, we're looking at the same thing. So it was, if nothing else, it was a way for us to say, hey, how can we sort of centralize what we can? Things are going to be different for different markets, obviously, but centralize what we can and then utilize those learnings across the globe, because the basic, fundamental, what a person with diabetes needs to do to help manage themselves is a global thing that we can go.
So let me think about this. So how do you not have redundancy, chaos, and confusion among well-meaning entities? You've got some folks who are managing and working at home. Well, let's start with a person that gets discharged from a hospital with a congestive heart failure.
Sure.
So the hospital people are doing what they're doing. Then you got them at home, and you got folks who are trying to give folks interventions at the home, so they've got their stuff. Now the patient goes to get their medication refilled at the pharmacy after they've been discharged. Are you in the same space and thinking of it the same way as the hospital people, the home people? Are you competing for which app or which intervention you can do? Or do you see that you're filling niches that connect somehow to a bigger vision?
Yeah, I think it's really the connection, and actually we'll stay with your scenario on the hospital discharge. So we actually have a program specifically that puts a Walgreens pharmacist at the bedside because we know that that's a very complex time for a patient and their family, quite frankly, right? You hear in the morning, hey, they're going to discharge you today, wonderful, and then 7 hours later, at that point you don't want to listen to anything, and they've got all this paperwork and all these things. So we actually have a pharmacist that will review everything, set you up with everything, and sort of bring those pill bottles out and then help manage along the way. And that's been a very successful program called Well Transitions. But on a broader perspective, there are a lot of entities, a lot of partners out there, all trying to do the same thing. We're all trying to get patients to, follow a regimen, whether that's nutrition or exercise or what have you. No smoking, no drinking. Be more adherent to their medications, right? And so whether it's the health plan, the health system, the pharma manufacturer, everybody's trying to do the same thing, right? And what we're blessed with is a brand, in particular in each market, whether it's Walgreens here or Boots in the UK. And so for us, we as a pharmacy-led company may not have the resources to do some of the great work that these other partners are doing. And so we're looking at and already starting to champion utilizing insights around that particular person to find the best, most deep intervention that's being offered. And whether that intervention is being offered by Walgreens or maybe one of our partners, it doesn't matter to us. We want to get the person in the right program at the right time and in the right mindset. And so utilizing that data that we have, whether it's sort of front of store data or back of store, we utilize that. And really, I think of it as like, what if you had that perfect pharmacist? And our pharmacists really know people. They know people more than just that person's on simvastatin, right? I mean, when you really go in and work at the stores, which I do frequently, they know what flowers that person's growing in their garden. They know that the person's daughter just went off to college. I mean, they know all these insights about these people, and they also know how to approach that person if they're not refilling their medications in time, right? And it's not just shaking their finger at them. It's going to be different for different people. So we're looking at utilizing that data to drive people to the best intervention for them, and oftentimes provided by our partners.
Great. Well, thank you. I'll come back to some more on that. I'm curious about that. So, Ruchin Kansal, you are the Executive Director and Head of Business Innovation for Boehringer Ingelheim. Excuse me. You have an enviable track record as a corporate entrepreneur who has successfully established new business units within large corporations. First, I heard that there was some announcement or something today. You want to tell us about that?
Yes, absolutely. So today we announced a partnership with Qualcomm, and the partnership is to really understand how we can make our Respimat device. So this is a medication that Boehringer Ingelheim makes for patients with COPD. It is a mist inhaler, one of the best devices out there, and the partnership we have announced with Qualcomm is to figure out how we can make this smart. So everything that we have been talking about, the location, the weather, whether I was lying down, standing up, et cetera, et cetera. So how can we make it smart so we can really begin to understand how the patient is taking care of themselves when they're on the medication, with the hope that that can generate insights for the patient and for the provider to really make it a better disease management solution for the patient.
So a little more detail on who is the target of this data. You mentioned patient and doc, but how's that going to work?
So in our mind, the audience for this data is the health plan, the health system, the patient, and also us, right? So from every stakeholder perspective, there's a different need that they're trying to solve for, and the data allows for them to solve for that need with the right insights. Hopefully for the health plans, the need that they solve for is how do they get the right patients on right medication and keep them healthy at the right cost. From a health system perspective, it could be around, how am I keeping my patient engaged in my system and, really keeping them healthy from population health perspective and, getting reimbursed for that at the right time. From pharma perspective, it could be what are we learning from the experience that the patient is having on our medication over time so that rather than creating a drug and keeping it on patent for 20 years, we can issue a version 1, version 2, version 3 more frequently. But most importantly, from the patient perspective, we all talked about how important the patient is, and patient always has been. I always have been the most important person in healthcare as a person. Hopefully, it allows me to take care of my life better. Like you said, as a person, all I'm interested in is how can I really not think about my disease and go on with what I want to do. And hopefully, in a very passive fashion, the data that I'm generating through these devices for myself can help me understand how I can make more smart decisions about staying healthy over time.
As an innovation entrepreneur, innovation only works or is sustained if it has a revenue stream that goes with it. So can you share a little bit about how the revenue stream is here? Data is valuable, and it's an asset. Who is the purchaser of the data? Is it all those folks who will buy it, or how does that work?
So the revenue question is the primary question whenever we start thinking about these innovations, right? And it is not just revenue from Boehringer Ingelheim perspective, but looking at it, what is in it for everyone of the stakeholders to be able to adopt what we are trying to sell in the market. So one approach that we always take is, let's not think about a specific technology or a specific point solution that we are going to bring into market, but let's think about it more broadly in terms of, from again, my perspective, how would I want my disease to be managed best, and what is that network of solution that I can create around me that will allow me to manage that and make it flexible enough so that I can plug and play what I need in that ecosystem as I need it. So it's really taking a little bit more of a broader architecture that's plug and play for the patient perspective, and then figuring out what should we plug and play over time in it that will allow us to, one, enhance value for our company by providing a solution that hopefully we can monetize, but at the same time allows other partners to also participate so that they find value in doing it that really serves their revenue stream.
So let me just play a little game. So if you are trying to sell or to be the top tier or the formulary of an insurance company, and you would say, if you give us favored nation status, you will do better because we will decrease preventable ER visits, hospitalizations, because not only is our drug terrific, but our delivery system is giving us data that then we can use that everyone in the system, the care delivery system, can use to better titrate the patient's need. Is that what ultimately it plays out as?
So that is Pharma 1.0, right? So yes, hopefully by making a value proposition which allows not only for our medication to be consumed, but as ecosystem around it which allows to measure how it is affecting, hopefully we can get a better formulary discussion going. But that's not where I think we need to be going. I think we need to be going beyond that, to stop thinking about the pharmaceutical product that we make, but really start to think about the disease problems that we are solving for. And that will require a different kind of business model. We are not there yet, but hopefully we can change the conversation from a product being sold for formulary to how we are a disease company.
Can I raise a making it real or keeping it real perspective? So I'm really excited about your announcement. Frankly, because it's the type of thing that we use at AMC Health. The reason, the genesis of our relationship with Qualcomm was 2NetHub, because we work with our customers, our being health systems or health plans, to gather data about patients and their conditions. And the use case that what you just described, the way we do it today to keep it real, is it's not even the patient who sees the data on are they using it. It's actually usually not the provider, because the provider already wrote the prescription for the patient to take it. It's the care team who gets the data from your device through 2Net to our platform. So now the care team sees that Gloria has not used, was that Spiriva that you had, has not used her Spiriva for the last 7 days. She picked up the prescription a week ago at Walgreens, but she hasn't used it for 7 days. That data enables the care team to then engage with the patient to find out, back to your comment, why aren't you using the inhaler? Is yours broken? Was there confusion about when you should be using it? And so the data, the portability of the data makes it possible for the patient to have that conversation about the care team, to therefore understand that they actually need to use it every day, to address whatever barriers that were keeping them from using it every day. And that's what we need wrapped around, frankly, all of our critical medications, especially to your point on the prevention. Because if we can close those gaps on the prevention through gathering the data, through remote patient monitoring, through gathering the data from pharmacies and other groups, then we can keep the people healthier before they even end up decompensating.
But the puzzle here is that the puzzle is moving so rapidly. Not only is the technology solutions moving in light speed, but then the players who are in the drama are changing. It's not the individual doc anymore, it's the connected team. It's not you're a different company. You're not doing what Walgreens did 3 years ago. You're trying to change and be in a whole different space. BI, you're deciding a whole different model of thinking. So, Tom Foley.
How we doing?
Well, you have pretty good, man. So you are the Director of Global Health Solutions Strategy for Lenovo Health, a proactive IT partner focused on mobility, security, and cloud solutions. You spent your career delivering innovative solutions to markets in areas as diverse as migrating the UPS call center from paper to electronic computing, capturing electronic signatures when a package is delivered, wireless data network design, and even early EHR formulation. What I'm particularly interested in for this panel is you also are providing an extraordinary amount of home care to your father-in-law who is suffering from a constellation of illnesses, which requires you to be very grounded in the issues of providing home-based care. So putting all that together with your background and all this notion of the movement and changing nature of the players on the chessboard, how do you think about connected enterprises and what do you sort of see happening in that space?
Well, it's interesting listening to the discussion so far today. On one side of the equation, you have a desire to achieve intelligent health, an intelligent health system. And on the other side of the equation, we have 250,000 deaths per year, and some related to the quality of the data. And then we had a lot of discussion in the middle about the data in and of itself. And the challenge here is that if you look across the ecosystem, because there are many different silos that are yet unconnected. And if you look across that ecosystem, and I'll just throw some statistics out there, EHR, regardless of whether you're using Epic or any other EHR, on average, 8 to 15% of your medical records are duplicates. Medical identity theft in and of itself is an $84 billion a year problem. And then you have payment fraud on top of that. The challenge, and then when we have all that data, and all the health systems realize they have duplicate records, they spend a manual effort in the background doing reconciliation. But Tom Foley on one side of the town got service. He was the real guy. The imposter was on the other side of the town, actually happened to be part of the same health system. He was on the other side of town. And for some other reason, those records now my data is corrupted. So there's a lot of challenges in and of itself in the current ecosystem. If we were to achieve an intelligent health system, we have a lot of fundamentals that we need to achieve, to address. We heard that HIMSS as an example. You can't achieve interoperability unless you address patient identity. And that, to me, is the single most fundamental challenge that we have in this network. So the ability to achieve, until today, the ability to achieve a universal patient identity platform across the continuum of care, independent of EHR, and inclusive of remote monitoring and telehealth, that unless we solve that problem together as a single community, we're not going to be able to achieve
Do you see any bright light on the horizon that gets at that?
Absolutely. Lenovo Health in and of themselves is actually, we were at HIMSS last year at launching an intelligent health patient identity platform, and you're going to see us at Chimes and HIMSS and a number of other locations throughout the next quarter, launching that in real time.
Why are you excited about FHIR?
Well, it's not, I did mention FHIR because it's part of in my view, it's part of the problem. When we talk about FHIR and we talk about different ways of establishing interoperability, I always use the example, I come from New Jersey, central New Jersey. I have great healthcare. I love you, man. I can go to New York City for some great healthcare. I can go to Wills High Hospital and some other great healthcare institutions in Philadelphia. And I can go right there in New Jersey. And they're all 3 different healthcare systems. And by the way, I might go to live in Florida for 6 months out of the year, right? All completely different healthcare systems, all completely different data silos. With FHIR, as much as excitement has come out of that particular protocol, if you will, or framework, it's a point-to-point solution. It doesn't solve where I go. I might be traveling to San Diego. I might have trouble on the airplane, and in order to get my healthcare records from Central Jersey, first I have to aggregate it over there, but then I need to send it to San Diego. There's no direct point-to-point protocol between my doctor in New Jersey to the hospital in San Diego, so it has no value. So it's a one-to-many. It needs to be in order to have a connected health and an interoperable healthcare system, you have to have a one-to-many infrastructure, all overlaid with a single patient identity platform. So when we merge data from a medical device in the home, or whether it be a prescription of drug or a medical device, or the average Medicare patient has 9 different doctors, and so exchanging all that data to make sure it's the right Tom Foley, it's a challenge today, and that's why in many areas why we still have 250,000 deaths a year because of quality of data.
So let me go back to you, Jonathan, and sort of get a sense. What are you looking for next to advance things like remote patient monitoring, in the home, and making that really, really move us forward? Not only just the devices themselves, but being able to capture the data that comes off those device streams.
I'm going to answer that 2 ways. First of all, we actually have enough now. We've talked about all the different devices. Nice to know that you're adding a whole suite as well, because the more devices, the more data, the more conditions we can engage people for. We've worked with enough of our customers to publish studies. They've published the studies using our platforms in peer-reviewed journals like JAMA, organizations like Geisinger and Health Partners. Our competition cites the studies as well to show that you can use remote patient monitoring for heart failure and improve clinical outcomes and save money, that you can do the same for diabetes, you can do the same thing for hypertension. So I think there's enough proof to show that this works, that we need to start moving with it. We as a society, as a health system. Are there still areas that we need to improve and further develop? Yes, because there still are newer medications and newer conditions that we need new devices to monitor. So we need to continue to develop the data capturing tools. We need to make, there was the comment about on the spread of the technology, the TuneNet Hub, on how the hub is still necessary because we still have a lot of seniors who aren't comfortable with smartphones. Average age of the patients being monitored by AMC Health is 78. Most of them don't have smartphones. We usually plug a cellular modem in the wall so that they forget about it. They just get on their scale. They just use their blood pressure cuff. So we have to make sure that we're making these technologies easier and easier for people to use. So we got a good demonstration. Anyone who's done a presentation has had slide problems at a presentation, so I don't mean to pick on you. But a great example of what do we do when technology fails and we know what to do. We've got to continue to make this technology easier to use for people, customers or patients, so that they can focus on capturing the data so that the care team can focus on the patients. That's going to accelerate the adoption, but looking at it from our perspective and from what we're doing with our customers across the country, there's enough value now that we should be running full speed.
How much of a rate limiting step is it for getting physicians and other health professionals comfortable with what you're doing? Are you still cheerleading, begging, cajoling, come on guys, let's get it together, or everybody's kind of on board?
So as CMO at AMC Health, I lead our efforts with that with our customers, and I say we try and take a Tai Chi approach. We try and make it easier for the providers to do the right thing for their patients. And that depends on where the providers are. So providers, we had comment earlier about patient-centered medical homes. Organizations that have robust PCMHs, part of a large statewide PCMH program in Rhode Island. So places like that where you have big infrastructure, people, processes, care teams, nurses, social workers. It's very easy for us to plug in programs for patient engagement with the patients in the home. Organizations that don't have that well-established structure for interdisciplinary care, okay, we're going to take a different approach so that the doc who wants to see the patient in the office, when our nurse team identifies that the patient's gaining weight with heart failure, they're going to schedule an appointment for that patient tomorrow. So we work with where the providers are, because you're right, the providers still drive care in this country, and so we have to meet them where they are.
You must have been pretty excited that the last panel, the CIOs are talking about their pledge. I mean, they were beautiful. They were like, look, my job is to help the care delivery people have a wonderful, easy life. I mean, they love you.
So I would say, again, the goal is to make it easy for the providers to do the right thing, which may not be the way the providers are doing it today.
Okay.
And so the challenge is helping the providers change without causing them too much angst.
So Greg, let me go back to you and just try to understand. How do you see the new potential complexities in all this mix of the precision medicine initiative? As we start to, we've talked about population management being so important. And while we're keeping that in our mind, we're also drilling really deep down now into issues around the individual. How do you sort of see that affecting what you do, and how do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the concept of population health management, even care management, case management, utilization management, was such a big thing like around the 2000s, right, when I kind of started my career in digital health. And that was everything, right? We got to get data on the folks and reach out, exception-based management. But the data was pretty infrequent, right? It was just based on their last lab test and maybe a little bit more data. And so it kind of died down a little bit. I worked with a lot of health plans, and it wasn't the topic of the day. And then now, I do think with the amount of data that we have and the ability to automate some of those pieces, it's just exploded again. Couple that with the fact that specialty is really a much more involved care management, even for the pharmacy side. As opposed to say Simvastatin, you give a little white bag and then you see them again in 30 days, right? Specialty is a different deal, right? Those become very complex means of putting these drugs in. It becomes a very care management oriented role that we play. And so we need the data behind that, right? And we're, quite frankly, we're a bit in the dark ages as an industry to not have that. So it's great. I mean, I think more and more, I do have a vision in, 3-5 years, we're going to look back and just go, can you believe what we were doing back then? You know what I mean? It's just amazing. And these patients need help. And it's something as simple as, managing something that's very measurable, like in the case of Parkinson's or something like that, that's very measurable, right? And my next door neighbor, when I was a child growing up, she had Parkinson's, and some days it would be really bad. And as a little kid, I'm going, what's wrong with our neighbor? And then other days she's up gardening and doing fine, right? And so I finally asked one day, well, what happened? And she said, well, I went back to the doctor and they found the right, mix of drugs, and I'm feeling so much better. And then it was basically a triangle curve, right? She would get real better and then slowly kind of decline, and then get real better and then slowly kind of decline. And it's dawned on me now that, once we get to the day that she can put a 50-cent patch on that's going to monitor that constantly and utilize the data to show that, hey, something needs to happen. At some point, the doctor either needs to change something, or perhaps even the data can change that.
Wait a minute, I'm drowning in data. You got a patch, all this is coming. You got people in your Walgreens that they're getting all kind of blood pressure readings from mobile devices. They're shooting diastolics and systolic information. I'm drowning in this. How do you handle the volume, and who does the analytics?
Yeah, that's going to be the big question of what role does each individual, I mentioned the health system, the health partner, and the health plan, and us, and those types of things. I mean, that's really what needs to be worked out. Again, we're all in this together. We all have programs around coaching and around adherence and those types of things, but it's going to be, I think that the real crux and the real change is going to be to figure out, who plays the most vital role and where to make those changes, possible. Right?
So Rushin, the partnerships. What's next in partnerships, and how do you see the role of partnerships helping to make this theoretical construct real in real life so that real human beings get better outcomes of care?
Well, I think that's our best chance. So again, speaking from a pharma company perspective, one thing that we very clearly know is we are good at understanding the mechanism of disease and creating medicines around it. But when it comes down to how a patient is treated, how a patient care is paid for, how a patient experiences their care, and how technology can help enable that. We don't have that expertise in-house. And if we are not able to find the right partners who can help us learn and really, create an ecosystem to be successful in that fashion, we won't be able to do it. So for that reason, we take partnerships to heart very, very seriously, and it is the only way we will advance. So, I mean, Qualcomm is an example of it, but we have partnerships with Humana, with Anthem, with Sutter Health, with other systems where we are looking at, what are the gaps in care? How can we really learn and modify clinical pathways? How can we create predictive models that help all of us, and how do we jointly create those solutions, right? So that's one part of partnerships that's very, very important to us. Technology companies, as we're thinking of digital health, we can think of the unmet need and the solution, but we can't really do anything about it unless we partner with companies like Qualcomm and Propeller Health of the world. So that's very, very important, and we really have to figure out how we become a partner of choice for these companies, and so on and so forth. So in my mind, partnership is going to be the core linchpin around which our company will really evolve into the next
What have you learned from your partnership? By the way, I'm out here, and I'm like looking for like the hands to go up and how difficult it's going to be for me to choose which of the many hands that have been raised. Thank you. I love you, brother. What have you learned from your Qualcomm partnership so far?
Well, it's a start with Qualcomm, and I hope we will learn quite a bit as we go along. What we have learned from other partnerships is it is as complex on the other side as it is on our side to make anything work. And it really comes down to, what is that common problem that you're trying to solve for, and how do you put the right people on both sides of the table to solve for it together. And that's not easy. So that remains the primary challenge in all the partnerships that we have so far, where we are trying to solve for things together.
Right. Would you introduce yourself?
Ken Bagan. We talk about personalized and seamless data. If we had a scale, for example, that could identify the person right away with toe print, other methods, and the kiosks and pharmacies, would that make a big difference so those readings can go direct to the doctor and that that's the right person, or if a reward for the insurance companies? Would that make a difference?
Good question. It's a great question.
If the question is, I am in multiple locations and I use different devices that feed data into the cloud, how do I know the identity of that patient? And is that what you're getting at?
I think part of it is that, but what he's also trying to do is how do we simplify the data interoperability exchange stream so that you don't have to go through middle people, but in fact, once you know with some reliability that this is actually, Rituxan, that it can go directly to the caregiver of choice.
Well, still the same thing holds true in the context of I have the average Medicare patient, 5 chronic diseases, 9 different doctors. They're all prescribing different things, right, hypothetically. And so I go to different locations for that data. So how do I take the data for my glucose monitor and send it to one physician, and the scale information to my weight and everything to another physician? That is ultimately the challenge. So the ecosystem about that, the question, to my view, when we talk about patient empowerment, it's almost as if we have to flip the model. The model is the data right now comes into an EHR and it's centralized and siloed. If you look at it from a macro HIE, I always call it a micro HIE for the patient. Maybe the patient is the one that needs to aggregate their data, because they get information. If you just look at the details of MU2, hey, I got to send you my medical records. Well, send it to one portal. Don't send it to 9 different portals, right? And send my data that's from my scale, my glucose monitor, and every other device to the same portal. And then when I go see a physician, I'll send that data, the summary data, if you will, over to the physician. The issue there then becomes trust of the data. How do you maintain the provenance of the data so that we know it came from a device, that the data wrapper didn't get ripped, and the physician who's receiving that data can trust it and actually use it in a meaningful way?
Let me make sure I understand the use of terminology. So you can either have you can have a cacophony of places where data goes. You can have it all go into an EHR that's a central one that the patient says, this is my life is captured by company X that has EHR, this EHR. And then anybody who wants to interact with me can get it, or you use the word portal. So any of you can help, how do you sort of envision these things sort of coming together?
You raised an early point about when we get the volumes of data, and actually you asked the question of who's going to look at when we're getting, hundreds and thousands, and what was the comment about a gigabyte per second or something on a new modem. Part of it is that it's so much data, an individual person can't actually address that data. So which is why all of our organizations, and I suspect most of the organizations represented in the room, are doing business intelligence initiatives. But that's also about getting those reports and analytics to the right person. And again, about getting to a care team or someone who can understand what those analytics and what those reports are saying about different individual people. So that's not necessarily about getting data to a portal for someone to look at. It's actually getting data to a place that the data can be processed so that the information about that data, when the CIO from Sharp was talking about data transparency, not about having people look in EHRs at different systems, but actually pushing the interpretations, the analyses of that data to the right team or the right person at the right time. Which then allows the patient to gather it from different places. So again, we need to go beyond actual, even individual people for that, just because of the volume of data we're dealing with.
Yeah. Interesting. Question? Sure.
Yes. Mike Keeling, Keeling Law Offices. As an engineer, I'd like to direct a question to the gentleman from Central Jersey. It sounds like you're a pretty technical guy, and it sounds like that the connectivity you've got down. My question has to do, rather than with the connectivity, with the risk analysis and that's associated with this data, and the relative allocation of risk amongst the players. And if you could speak to what level of friction, what level of resistance to progress that risk analysis or lack thereof and the ability to allocate is going to play out, how that's going to play out as we see these data systems become more ubiquitous.
Good question.
Well, the challenge here is collaboration, in my view. I think it was mentioned in an earlier panel or an earlier discussion. In some contexts, physicians are competitors with each other. And the idea of sharing patient data is driving towards this issue of the more data that I share, the more competitive information that I'll share, because my patient might like that doctor better. So I'm going to go over there and lose my patient, right? So there's some competition that needs to be addressed. In my view, because of the increasing population, the increasing volume of chronic conditions, and a lesser number of physicians that are available to take care of those physicians, there shouldn't be that issue. There's plenty of patients to go around. But I think that the risk of not, if I understand the question correctly, the risk of not sharing data or not having all the data, I mean, I think it is a panacea in the next couple of years to think that we're going to be able to aggregate all this data so the physician can have the right data set to make the right clinical decision. But I think it's more of community collaboration. And again, in my situation, and it's in many scenarios, I don't expect New York City to collaborate with Philadelphia, right? It's just not going to happen. It's really about my community of care, not the health system's community of care. And if you can make it attractive to me to stick with one community of care, I'll bite and go, and then you mitigate the risk. But for now, I go to the best physician that's in my healthcare system, not the best healthcare provider I should say, I go to the best provider within my payer system versus the best provider within a healthcare system. And until the healthcare system can convince me to do all my shopping in one healthcare system, then the challenge will always exist that you'll never have the right data to make the absolute 100% clinical answer that's necessary.
I think one of the good things in Chris Talbot's presentation was, you noticed that I was impressed by the number of places where data was encrypted. all along the cycle. And hopefully that kind of gets also a little bit at it. Question?
Hi, I'm Aaron Contora, founder and CEO of FP Complete. We're a software house here in San Diego focusing on predictive analytics, scalability, and especially on repeatability. As we've been working with a variety of medical device makers and EMRs, one of the things we've found about the data is that the quality of data is abysmal. The creator of any database, of any body of data, seems to be focusing on just solving a very specific problem, and if a piece of data isn't necessary for the task at the moment, then the data isn't really cared for, the data's wrong, or the data's missing, and the data's got gaps in it, which makes data aggregation incredibly hard. It makes it seem to me that a lot of integrations that sound like they should be doable right away actually don't work, because the data is no good. There was a place to put it in, but it wasn't put in, or it wasn't put in right. I'd like to ask everyone on the panel if they've had similar experiences with data quality being a problem.
Let me just get one of y'all. Good question, though. Ms. Dance. Who wants to take it? Anybody having that same trouble?
Well, I think it's true. I mean, the quality of the data is really, again, central to the challenges that we have. I mean, you're right. This data is the only entry of the data is what's relative to that one encounter. And when you have 8,760 hours in a given year, and the average Medicare patient only sees their entire provider team 15 hours out of that year, that's the quality gap. That's the gap in care. So it's not only what's captured, the lack of data that's captured in care, it's the much more lack of data that's captured outside of care. Did I go get my scripts? Did I actually exercise? Did I do X, Y, and Z? We're still a very reactive healthcare system in the context of, I only go to at the end of the day, every doctor is out of business. In the context of, they're only in business when I decide to make an appointment to go see them, right? So until we flip on quality, and if we're truly going to go to value as opposed to volume, then I think that's when we're going to get reality about what do we really need to do to mitigate our risk, our overall risk, and what do we need to do to provide a true engaging healthcare system and a service where it's going to be attractive to me to get.
Jonathan, you trying to get in real quick?
Yeah, I was going to say, when you asked earlier barriers to rolling out more telehealth, remote patient monitoring, engaging patients, capturing data, one of the costs that we face with our customers is addressing that issue of poor quality data. So we don't use consumer grade scales or blood pressure cuffs. We use industrial scale, FDA cleared devices. We have teams of people, including clinicians, to work with the patients so that they understand. You wake up in the morning, you pee or you poop, then you get on the scale to weigh yourself. You check your blood pressure an hour or two after you've taken your blood pressure medications. These are human efforts that end up being expensive, but they're needed to improve the data capture. And if we could make better Bluetooth-enabled scales that were going to be with better validation profiles, that were going to be half the price, the whole cost of these programs would go down.
I think we don't want to underestimate the interest of the patient or the customer themselves, right? I mean, I know PHRs kind of fell by the wayside because we thought that people really wanted to look at their data. They don't really want to look at their data, but they want to know that they have access to it and they can get it somewhere. In your case, that data is not just going to go shooting over to Florida, but when you go there and you got to fill out that form, you do think, I wish I could just send this information over, right? And so, I believe that the power of us to look at our own data. I mean, you look at your bank statements pretty frequently. When you see a transaction that's wrong, you act on it, right? So I do believe that we'll really start to empower ourselves as things start to happen. You go, what's wrong? Well, let me look at the data here. We're all kind of responsible for that ourselves. And I think that's a big change.
So, Greg, that was actually a perfect setup for my question.
Nice.
I'm Lisa Roberts with AMC Health, and I have the pleasure of working with Jonathan, and we get to talk about bodily functions all the time. So it's quite fun. But if you think about banking or the banking industry, most of us not only have a cell phone, but we traveled here with a credit card or two or three. And what's amazing is that if we think about how those are used, they can detect fraud. They can kind of keep track of what your accounts are wherever you may be. They've got ATMs that are all interconnected. So how do we, as a connected healthcare system, get to that model, or is that the right model to aspire to? But I just think that, how great is it that they could tell that I didn't go buy X when I just bought Y and that kind of stuff.
Good question.
I think, I mean, I'll kind of start there. I mean, the importance, is, especially as we start to engage the consumer, is to have a brand, right? And it's difficult in the health industry in general. You may have a brand in certain markets, right up in the Northwest where I live, like, you know, everybody knows who Providence is, right? And in other markets, you know your health system. But as you start to move and we become more mobile, it's very difficult to have that connection to a brand. So, you know, that's one of the areas, and why Walgreens, you know, folks often say, you know, aren't you just a pharmacy? It's like, no, we are pharmacy-led, and we have, I mean, the cost of entrance is to do wonderful at pharmacy, but we do see ourselves as this brand that people go to and to capture more and more information. So that's why we're doing things like immunization trackers and making certain that to do reminders around immunizations and things that are kind of part of our core is to engage that consumer in their own healthcare. We think it's very, very important.
Yeah, I mean, it is really a question that keeps us up at night. I mean, as we see more and more consumerization of healthcare, and you and I paying more dollars out of our own pockets to really take care of our own health. Pharma industry, you know, for good or for bad, has been a B2B industry. And now the challenge for us is, do we become irrelevant in this care where patient is the consumer, and how do we build that bridge? And are we going to be the trusted partner where the patient will be willing to say, hey, Pharma X, you are the company I will come to for all my healthcare needs. We don't know that. So that keeps us up at night, and frankly, we don't have an answer to that right now. Hopefully, we will be able to leverage the ecosystem of our partners again to remain relevant in that environment.
Good. Question?
Hi, William Harding from Medtronic. So we're often developing solutions that, you know, we think, okay, hot, ta-da, here it is, you're going to use it. You're going to start using it just because we developed it. So we don't really consider perspectives appropriately. And I use like the Indian model where we say, you know, we talk to the doctors, but we didn't talk to the pharmacists. So looking at that, and, you know, I wrote the question down so I wouldn't forget. Within the scope of aggregating disparate healthcare solutions, how do you foresee influencing the adoption or acceptance of healthcare technology? And is that answer considered of only the patient, payer, or healthcare provider, or even all three? So how are you going to get this technology? How are you going to get these people to accept it from a usability and usefulness standpoint?
Yeah, I'll start and then pass it over. Our entire philosophy is to find friction in our customers' life. And whether that's, you know, getting obviously a prescription and building out, you know, inventing drive-through because we saw the friction of trying to, you know, park the car, get the kids out, go get the pills and things like that. We're moving into telemedicine, not because we want to be a care provider, but we see that friction that's oriented in having to go to a doctor and take time off work and sit in the waiting room, talk to the doctor on very simple things that aren't complex, not like, you know, complex care management type things. So we specifically look for those points of friction and then find ways through almost always through partnerships to bring you know, folks through that, and then we monitor that. Are people using it? Do they like it? Do they dislike it? What do they like? What do they dislike? And just make that experience better and better and better.
Yeah, and I think our approach to that is, I think we are lucky that we are coming to the digital health space a little late. And so there are a lot of companies that have experimented with, you know, what's possible, and there are some winners and losers out there. And so I think we are, given our approach of, you know, we are trying to create an ecosystem where we can plug and play. We can be flexible in choosing the technologies that we are seeing more proof of adoption. And that's really how we are trying to solve for it, because we know we can't solve for it on our own.
Are you too early in your new capability on your inhaler product to know whether or not patients are going to be wildly enthusiastic? I mean, to me, it would just seem like this is terrific. I mean, but I'm not, you know, obviously I'm at a different level of sophistication, I guess, than the average consumer. But wouldn't they be loving this?
You would hope so. So, I mean, we are in midst of a rollout of a technology platform in the market. And our goal was to enroll 2,500 patients in a period of X months. I can tell you we are already behind. And we are already behind not because the technology isn't great and not because, you know, it doesn't do good things. It's because of real world challenges like, you know, you need a prescription. So you need a health system to really sign up and be willing to prescribe it. You need patients on therapy that are willing to use it. And then there is the whole legal regulatory compliance perspective that wraps around all of that. So our learning today is, yes, even though it may be really sexy and really useful and really solves for adherence and really makes people's health better, our ecosystem does not allow it to be operationalized very quickly. There are a lot of barriers you have to go through to really drive that adoption.
Jonathan, what about you, from your point of view? Are your patients deliriously happy?
I think we keep learning way broader than just AMC Health. I think all of us trying to improve healthcare and using technology, that healthcare is a very human experience. And part of the exciting thing about the technology is it enables us to use different people to interact with patients, customers, to understand what they need to do to help address their healthcare needs, because we can tee up information so that you don't need to, so that one level it's for a doctor, another level it could be for the medical assistant. And so, the things that we do at AMC Health is very much leveraging the care team. It's using the technology to bring the information so that the care team can have the conversation with the patient. That way the patient is not just turning to a piece of technology. Conversation wouldn't have happened if the technology wasn't there so that we knew the patient was using their pump effectively at the right time or whatever. So the technology is critical. But we haven't figured out how to remove people completely from that process. Dr. Jeff Rose, who used to be the VP of Quality Informatics at Ascension, has talked about maybe when we have the right clinical decision support, you'll want to go to a physician, maybe you want to go to a nurse, maybe you want to go to a member of the clergy. There's going to be a system that's going to tee up the information, but people still tend to want to have the human relationship to navigate their own decisions around healthcare.
Good. Last question.
Yeah, Mark Ott, surgeon and from Intermountain Healthcare, Chief Medical Director. I firmly believe and have no doubt that this endeavor is going to success. There's going to be many of the people in this room are going to develop devices that are going to be incredibly important in medicine, and they're going to be rewarded handsomely financially. And when that happens, there's going to be a tidal wave of data pouring into individual people and patients and to their caregiver and care teams, and it is going to overwhelm both sides of that relationship. And so I think that the real prize is developing the intelligence that is going to interpret all of that data, that is then going to tell the family and patient and the caregiving team that this is a problem among the 12,000 potential people that we just looked at in the last 5 minutes. And so my question to you is, who's going to build that layer that is really the key to success in this endeavor?
Well, while I agree with the assessment, to some degree there needs to be two different data analytics platforms, one for the provider and one for the consumer. But the question is, would the consumer actually buy it? So who would build it if they're not going to buy it? So there's got to be, I always like the classic internet model going back a way, when some things were just given to the patient or was given to the market as seeds to get momentum and to drive adoption. And then the rewards come later on. It's not just an immediate need. So I'm not quite sure who's gonna build it, but that's another dynamics, another challenge relative to achieving that milestone. There is going to be a lot of data. We all see it coming, but it'll be a slow adoption, I'm sure.
Last question.
My question's for Greg. As part of Sharp Healthcare, as I said, we do a lot of capitation. We manage a lot of populations. And our organization, and especially our medical group, is continually trying to control where the patients go. They want to provide their own pharmacy, their own services. So my question is, you will have an ability to help really more effectively manage those patients. But what are you doing to become a partner or to connect with organizations to make them understand the value and not see you as just another fragmentation in the delivery system?
That was for me, Craig. Yeah, it's really, really hard to hear. So yeah, no, I mean, that has been the crux of our partnerships, and so you're starting to see, even with our healthcare clinics, we started a new model. Providence it was the first partner, Advocate, and SAS in St. Louis has joined that as well. And we've always moved carefully and closely with those health systems to make sure that it's not fragmented, right? That our efforts are actually combined, and we're really starting to see some great responses on that new model, because now they come to Walgreens for other than just prescriptions. They come to Walgreens for simple things, right? For immunizations and those types of services. But when we ask the question, which we always do at the healthcare clinics, do you have a PCP? About 40% will say no. And so, our older model was, hey, you really need to get one. Well, that's a really bad time to tell somebody about getting a PCP when they probably got strep throat and they just want to get home, right? That's not what they do. They don't jump out and do that. And so with this new partnership, now you've actually got a Providence employee in our store, in that clinic, who's actually saying, hey, let's just sign you up for a PCP now. You want to get an appointment? I'll schedule it. It's actually right next door since you live right here. And boom, they can kind of connect that person and get them back into the system. So yeah, it's very, very important that we become part of that healthcare continuum and not segregated out. So that's our new model.
Anybody else want to come? You all right? I'm going to give each of you 10 seconds to think in your mind for your 1-minute lightning round. I'm going to go this way around of whatever it is that you want to leave this audience with. Either you've already said it and you want to be more emphatic, or you didn't get to say it and you're going to be pissed off at Reed because you didn't get a chance. But while I'm tap dancing for you. Rick, I tell you, I think this last panel really, really ought to make you excited, because the things that you have already created are terrific, but the opportunities, that everything that we've heard here in terms of problems are things that you are addressing solutions for. And I just think that I would be ecstatic if I was in your chair because of the opportunity to really add value on these conundrums. And I can't think of any company that could do it better than you. So you've got to be pretty levitating right about here. Because, we could all decide that problems are just, get frustrated by the problems, or we could be the solutions to the problems. And I know you're solution-oriented. So, lightning round. What do you want to make sure that this audience hears on your final thoughts on this topic?
It all centers on data quality. Lack of quality leads to poor decisions. At the end of the day, you have to look at your health records and ask yourself, how are we eliminating medical identity theft? How are we eliminating duplicate records? The ONC themselves in their interoperative roadmap has the goal of reducing duplicate records from the 8 to 15% that I said earlier to 2% by 2017. That's next year. The question is, what is your EHR vendor doing for you? And what are you doing for yourselves relative to addressing that challenge? And that's why you need a universal patient identity platform to address the quality of the data. One ID, one record.
Thank you.
In my mind, it's how do we keep it simple? We have all talked about the complexity all day long, and healthcare is very, very personal. And I, as a patient, when I'm sick, want more simplicity than complexity. So yes, it's great to talk about how we can really enable and empower the patient and solve for their care, but till we make it very, very, very simple for it to be implemented from a patient perspective, it won't stick. So what keeps us up at night, my team keeps up at night, is how do we keep it simple?
And part of keeping it simple is remembering that this is a clinical scenario. This is about healthcare. And the more intense the clinical scenario, the sicker the patients we're talking about, the people who are the higher utilizers who are going in and out of the hospital the most, the ones that we want to focus on the most to help them feel better, but also to save money, are the ones that need the most human touch. We've got to get the technology right. We now have the technology that we can engage them where they are at home. But we've got to remember that that technology needs to be surrounded by care teams and healthcare service processes.
Great.
So customer adoption and engagement is not the problem, it's the solution. We underestimate, I think, how fast customers will adopt something if we make it very, very simple for them to do so. That balanced reward for healthy choices where people earn points for just logging their weight and walking a mile and things like that. Just 3 short years ago, 90% of our folks were manually entering the data, going in, going into our app, going into the website, and logging that in. We started making it easier and easier and easier to connect these devices. Qualcomm obviously played a very important role to that, as we announced last year. Now that the tide has completely turned, very few people manually enter, as you can imagine. Everybody's using a connected device, right? So if we make things really, really simple, we will get them to adopt, and that's really how we're going to start to change healthcare and get people really, really engaged in their health.
Thank you very much. Can we get a round of applause for the panel? Oh, you guys can go ahead. So as we close out and wrap up, let me just remind you, what have we been through today? I think we've had a pretty exciting deep dive into the levels of what Qualcomm is trying to do from a vision point of view, from a connectivity point of view, from an interoperability point of view, and from a security point of view. I think we've gotten a pretty good vision of all of that for Qualcomm Life. I think it's pretty exciting. I think we have done a pretty good job now of focusing in on the three themes. Again, security in a connected world, unlocking data and insights to deliver intelligent care, and creating a seamless care continuum. But as we have heard, we have a ways to go to get to where we want to be.